हरि ओम। ओम सहनावतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ओम शांति शांति शांति। श्रुति स्मृति पुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शंकरं लोकशंकरम् शंकरं शंकराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतो वन्दे भगवन्तो पुनः पुनः समस्तजनकल्याणे निरतं करुणामयम् नमामि चिन्मयं देवं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरम्। ओम श्री चिन्मय सद्गुरवे नमः। हरि ओम। The quest for the truth is and can never be an easy task. A philosophical storm, both metaphysical and ontological, epistemological, on a vigorous basis, substantially aided by the intuitive experience, is a must to grapple the question of what is the ultimate reality. We may designate it as Brahman or Brahma, but designation alone does not mean that we understand it. The intuitive experience, the personalized comprehension of the reality is far distant a thing. The aparoksha jnanam is the culmination of not years of toiling, but multiple births of toiling. However, even to grapple the subject of reality or Brahman, in terms of paroksha jnanam, also requires enormous amount of intellectual integrity. And that is why we saw under the Uttara Mimamsa or the Vedanta how one lone sannyasi, starting from the distant south of Kerala, with only one wooden staff in the hand, vanquished all the other interpretations of Brahman and established what is referred as Kevaladvaita, the absolute monism. Very consciously and very powerfully, he attacked, he argued, and he defeated the Pradhana Malla, the Buddhist, and also the other Nastika Darshanas. He was equally adept in dealing with the Vaisheshikas, the Sankhyas, as well as the Nayayikas. Brahma Sutra Grantha is replete with the references in the Purva Paksha of all these darshanas. Thus, He established the supremacy of Uttar Mimamsa over all the other darshanas, as well as completely vanquished the Nastik darshanas. However, well within the fort of Uttar Mimamsa itself, Shankaracharya was seriously challenged, and one may say even successfully challenged by the other schools of Vedanta. The same amount of arduous logic. If Shankaracharya was metaphysicist by par excellence, Ramanuja perhaps even excelled Shankaracharya in establishing his doctrine of Vishishta Advaita. The serious contender or the serious challenge to Shankaracharya came from Ramanujacharya, the Acharya par excellence, the creator of Sri Sampradaya, the school of philosophy that had a substratum on Vishnu or Narayana Bhakti. The not the originator, but the propagator of South Indian variant of Tamil Pranta variant of Vaishnava Bhakti. And the great Acharya successfully brought together the erstwhile tradition of the Alvar saints who existed before Ramanujacharya for a few centuries. The philosophical expositions through the bhakti compositions made by the Alvar saints and the Rishi called Bodhayana Rishi, who had commented on Brahma Sutra much earlier, after studying the Advaita under Yadav Prakasha Maharaj, shifting from Advaita towards the Vishishta Advaita with the help of Alvar saints and the Bhakti tradition, well supplemented by the critical appreciation done by Bodhayana Rishi on Brahma Sutra, Ramanujacharya established Vishishta Advaita. Brahma Sutra on a grosser scale, well before Shankaracharya, being in existence, was commented by the Rishis prior to Shankaracharya, and those vrittis somehow are not all of them available as of today because they are lost with the time, but they were there during the periods of Shankaracharya and Ramanujacharya, and the vritti that we call as Bodhayana vritti, written by the Upavarsha Maharaj. Bodhayana Rishi himself wrote Bodhayana Bhasya on Brahma Sutra, which is lost. However, the same Bodhayana Bhasya, on that a vritti was written by Upavarsha Maharaj, Upavarsha Rishi, which was in the readings of Ramanujacharya. So we find certain trends about commenting on Brahma Sutra well before Shankaracharya. One of the Acharya is Audulomi, one of them is Kasha Krutsna, one of them is Asmarthya, and of course the Bodhayana. Each of the Acharyas later on, whether it is Nimbarkacharya, Vallabhacharya, Ramanujacharya, or Shankaracharya, somewhere or the other, they have read or got influenced by few of these vrittis or bhashyams that existed well before them. However, as per the Hindu tradition of intellectual comprehensions of the Prasthanatrayi, Upanishads, Brahma Sutra, and Bhagavad Gita, the commentator has to be an Acharya. That means he has to write commentaries on all three. And no Acharya can start a commentary on any of these Prasthanatrayas unless he belongs to one sampradaya. That is called sampradayic vichar. In other words, you cannot just sit on Brahma Sutra and come out with your own theory, because your jnana or your exposition shall depend on Shabda Pramana, which has vital importance in all pramanas of all the Shastras. Those who have earlier treaded the path and seen the truth or had the glimpse of truth and have given their comments under the auspices of that light of their knowledge, the next Acharya starts his journey, which is called Sampradaya. So we have Advaita Sampradaya starting from Vyasa Maharaj, who gave it in turn to the Shuka Maharaj, then it came down to the Gaudapada, then it came to Govindapada, and then it came to Shankaracharya. So the Kevala Advaita is dependent on the tradition Advaita Parampara or Advaita Sampradaya. In the similar manner, the Sampradaya of Ramanuja Acharya had started with Bhagwan Vishnu himself. So traditionally, the Sampradaya is described as starting from Bhagwan Sri Vishnu or Narayan. From there it came to Sri Lakshmi. From there it came to a human form called Vishwaksena. Vishwaksena gave it to Shatakopa. Shatakopa Roshi gave it to Nath Muni, one of the stalwarts of South Indian Bhakti literature, Nath Muni, who gave it to Pundarikaksha. Pundarikaksha gave it to Rama Mishra. Rama Mishra gave it to Yamuna Acharya. The Yamuna Acharya was the most pivotal person in the life of Ramanuja Acharya. Unfortunately, when Yamuna Acharya sent an invitation to Ramanuja Acharya to come over and take the seat of Pitham, Ramanuja Acharya could reach Yamuna Acharya. He died. The would-be disciple was extremely disheartened to see the death of his would-be guru, who could not physically initiate him. And when he was touching the feet of the dead body of his guru, he realized that the right three fingers of his right hand of Yamunacharya were raised. This itself was taken as initiation by Ramanujacharya, and he realized that there are three incomplete tasks that Yamunacharya wants him to complete. One of them is writing a commentary on Brahma Sutra, and that is how Ramanujacharya wrote the Bhashyam called Sri Bhashyam. He took proper initiation at the hands of Rishi Mahapurna Maharaj, gave him the initiation and named him as Ramanuja Acharya. Similarly, Nimbarka Acharya Maharaj belongs to a sampradaya called Hamsa Sampradaya. So we have Advaita Sampradaya, Shri Sampradaya, then we have Hamsa Sampradaya, which again starts with Bhagwan Vishnu, then to Hamsa, then to Brahma, then to Kumara, then to Narada Muni, and then Nimbarka Acharya. That is the Parampara, Acharya Parampara of Hamsa Sampradaya. We also have Rudra Sampradaya, to which Vallabha Acharya belongs, who gave the philosophy of Shuddhadvaita. It starts again with Bhagwan Vishnu, then comes Bhagwan Rudra, then Vishnu Swami in human form, and then Vallabha Acharya. Similarly, the famous Dvaiti scholar Madhva Acharya, who gave Dvaita philosophy interpretation of Vedanta, he belongs to Brahma Sampradaya, which again starts from Bhagwan Vishnu, then to Brahma, then to Vashishta, then to Shakti, then to Parashar, Vyasa Muni, and in human form, the guru of Madhvacharya, who is known as Purna Padma, and Madhvacharya. Similarly, the Gaudiya Vaishnav Sampradaya, the only North Indian Vaishnav Sampradaya, owes its allegiance to Madhvacharya, and the most famous Rishi of that lineage is Mahaprabhu Chaitanya or Gauranga. So we have 5 main Sampradaya giving 5 main Advaita philosophy, and all the 5 are different than Kevaladvaita. Kevaladvaita of Shankaracharya is absolute monism. Keval Advaita, there is no place even for Ishvara in that. It is non-theistic, absolutely monistic. While all remaining 5 sampradayas completely disagree with Kevaladvaita, they all believe in theism, they all believe in God form, maybe form of Vishnu or Narayana or Rudra, but they do believe in Ishvara, the same omnipotent, omniscient Ishvara with all its gunas or attributes is the Brahman. In Kevaladvaita, Ishvara happens to be a tool. As long as we are in the Vyavaharika Vishwa, you require an alamban or a support. The support is provided by Ishvara only to scale on the shoulders of Ishvara, thereby forgetting the Ishvara and reaching the absolute monistic ideal called Keval Advaita. Unlike this, opposed to this, all other sampradayas do take Ishvara as the ultimate Gantavya Sthana, because Ishvara is in the form of Narayana or Sri Vishnu, is the Gantavya Sthana, is the Brahma. This brings us to the Vishishtadvaita. We all shall try to get the glimpse of the different types of schools without getting into more details, sufficient enough to prepare us to start the study of Brahma Sutra. The Ramanujacharya, his greatest contribution was he relied upon the already existing Vaishnava saints called Alvar Sant, Vaishnava Sant from the land of Tamil Nadu. These saints, they were existing almost 1,000 years before Ramanujacharya in different periods. And it was not a new attempt to have the bhakti tradition of Alvars, because the bhakti as a tradition was anyway developing and propagating in the Bharatavarsha almost at all the places right from the time of Vedas. So we have 3 main streams that came from the bhakti stream. The earliest bhakti sampradaya that we see is called Pancharatra Sampradaya. The early mention of Vasudeva and his worship is seen in this Pancharatra Sampradaya, who later on developed itself as Vaishnava Sampradaya. So whether it is the Hari Puja in Karnataka, Haridasas, whether it is the Pandharpur Vithala, whether it is the Narayana of Sri Sampradaya, whether it is Krishna of Mahaprabhu Chaitanya, all of them owe their base to the Pancharatra Sampradaya. They are also called Satvat. And this Pancharatra Sampradaya have a treatise called Pancharatra Samhita. This Pancharatra Samhita is the first compilation based on Vedic ideal of bhakti, which was in the trace form in different Veda Upanishads, also coming into the fruition and getting a substantial form as a bhakti sampradaya was this Pancharatra Samhita, giving rise to Vaishnavism. In the similar manner, the other bhaktas got together into formation of what is called as Shaiva Sampradaya, giving utmost importance to Lord Shiva, and the scripture that evolved is called Shaiva Samhita or Shaiva Agama. And a third trend also developed, which focused itself on the esoteric or occult practices of Tantra, Mantra, and Yantra. They are called as Shakta Pantha or Shakta Sampradaya. As the time proceeded, Shakta Sampradaya almost aligned itself with Shaiva Sampradaya. So Shaiva and Shakta became almost one. However, Vaishnavas remained distinctly separate and Shaivas remained distinctly separate, leading even sometimes to the physical skirmishes and assaults and wars and whatnot. The development of Vaishnava Tattvajnan, which came from Pancharatra, the Pancharatra itself believes in the most important sukta of Rigveda called Purusha Sukta. So Purusha Sukta is the origin of thought of bhakti that started from Purusha Sukta, entered into Pancharatra, and developed as the Vaishnava Sampradaya. The Vaishnava Sampradaya, which became prominent under Ramanujacharya, then spread slowly towards the Karnataka side, mainly because of the excommunication of Ramanujacharya for a period of 12 years in Karnataka. So the seeds were sown at that point of time, which later on developed into these Dvaitas of Madhvacharya, then also the Pandharpura tradition. All these Bhakti Sampradayas then at respective places started getting their own shape and size, but all of them essentially at the heart remained Bhakti Sampradaya, relying on personal God in the form of Narayana or Vishnu. Similarly, the Puranas were also there to substantiate these Bhakti Sampradayas. So we have Vishnu Purana, Bhagavata Purana, Garuda Purana, Padma Purana, and Varaha Purana, favoring the Pancharatra or the Vaishnavas. While the Kurma Purana, Vayu Purana, Aditya Purana, and Agni and Linga Purana, it favors the Shaivas. Now, if one reads the Shaiva Puranas, Vaishnavas are denounced. If one reads the Vaishnava Puranas, we do get references denouncing the Shaivas. That is not for the sake of jealousy or hatred, but for the sake of establishing their own school of thought, supremacy over the other school of thought. The Pancharatra tradition, it may be worthwhile mentioning that why the name of Pancharatra was used, because the Pancharatra Samhita deals with 5 topics, so it is called Pancharatra 1. Pancharatra is essence of 4 Vedas and 1 Darshana called Sankhya, so it is called Pancharatra. And it is believed as a matter of faith that the Pancharatra was told by Narayana to his 5 disciples in 5 nights. That is why it is called Pancharatra. This Samhita is available for study. It is not lost. And Pancharatra happens to be the scripture of study for most of the Vaishnavas. Coming back to Ramanujacharya, the Alvar saints, which spread over 1,000 years in Tamil Nadu, these Alvar saints were the one who were completely immersed into the bhakti of Narayana. And the best part was during the times when the Varnashrama has become absolutely ossified or stratified with lot of supremacy and misinterpretation of Varnashrama, leading to the development of untouchability and supremacy of Brahmanical culture. At that point of time, the so-called neglected, downtrodden, as well as the untouchables and all other lower castes were adopted freely without any inhibitions in Bhakti Sampradaya. So out of the 12 Alvar saints, one was prince, another one was lady, the third one was a Shudra. So the all-inclusive, all-encompassing Alvar saints appealed to the minds of the entire South India. And then we see that these saints, in the height of the ecstasy that they experienced out of bhakti, they composed glorious hymns in the praise of Vishnu and Narayana, indirectly also giving the hints of the metaphysical and the philosophical aspects of their school of thought. The such 4,000 verses have been collected of all the Alvar saints, and these 4,000 collection verses is called Nalaira Prabandham. There are 4,000 verses in Nalaira Prabandham, and it is also referred to as a Tamil Veda. The status given to the compositions compiled as Nalaira Prabandham by the Alvar saints is equated with the Vedas, that is the level of reverence given by saints to them. In fact, there is a division of people following Bhakti Sampradaya in South India, where there are people who consider Vedas as the supreme, and there are people who consider this Nalaira Prabandham as the supreme than Vedas. These 12 Alvar saints were then followed by the Acharyas, which were called Adagiyas. Nath Muni is the first Acharya of this tradition. He was the disciple of Madhura Kavi Alvar. Nath Muni was the first person who wrote early philosophical aspect of Vishishtadvaita, and he called it as Nyaya Tattva. Second great Acharya was Yamuna Acharya. He's famous by the name Alvandar. He wrote scripture called Siddhitraya, which underlined the Vishishtadvaita. And then Yamunacharya, Mahapurna Swami, and then came Ramanujacharya. So that is how the bhakti shaped the philosophy of Ramanujacharya into Vishishtadvaita. 2 centuries after Ramanujacharya, the Vishishtadvaita school got divided into 2 main branches which are still existing. One is called Vadagalai and another is called Thengalai. The Vadagalai is by Vedanta Deshika Acharya, and Thengalai is by the southern school, is by the Lokacharya. It is this Ramanujacharya who propounded the Vishishtadvaita by studying the earlier literature, by following the Alvar saints, and of course his own Guru Mahapurna and Yamunacharya Maharaj. What is Vishishtadvaita? Vishishtadvaita does believe in Advaita. So that is the first part. Vishishtadvaita is not a Karmadharaya Samasa, but it is Bahuvrihi Samasa. Karmadharaya means Visheshana Vishishta, or adjective and or adverb to one word That relationship is not expected in Vishishtadvaita. Monism, whose special characteristic is its speciality. Advaitam, which has a character of Vishishta, is Vishishtadvaita. What is this Vishesh or Vishishta in this Advaita? Vishishtadvaita absolutely believes in Advaita. So first of all, there is no Dvaita anywhere. However, unlike Shankaracharya's Kevaladvaita, where only and only Brahma exists, everything else is Mithya. Jiva is Mithya, Jagat is Mithya, Maya is Mithya, Sambandham between all this is Mithya, everything is Mithya, only Brahman is the reality. Keval Advait. Ramanujacharya completely disagrees with that. He says Jagat is there, it is not Mithya. Jiva is there, it is not Mithya. However, Jagat is not separate from Brahman, Jiva is not separate from Brahman, but they are all one. To give an analogy, this body of ours is made up of thousands and billions of cells. Some of them are brain cells, some of them are heart cells, some of them are muscle cells. But are they different than the body? They are not. So there is an existence called blood cell, but this blood cell is not separate from the body. The blood cell is there as long as the body is there. So that means Jiva and Jagat is nothing else but the part of the body of Ishvara. So it is the Anga. Jiva and Jagat is Anga of Ishvara. Ishvara is Angi. Body part and the body. These are all Anshas. He is Anshi. These are all Sheshis. He is Shesha. The relationship between Jiva, Jagat and Ishwar is of interdependence. So if we look at the interdependence, they are separate. However, they are separate in one entity. So they are Advaita, but in a Vishishta manner, in a peculiar manner. So there is no truth in the statement of Shankaracharya that Jiva is Mithya, Jagat is Mithya. No, Jagat is real, Jiva is real, and it is not only real, it is part and parcel of the Ishvara. However, the nature of Jiva and Jagat and its relationship with the Ishvara is of a peculiar nature, Vishishta method. That is why it is Vishishta Advaita. Together yet separate. Diversity need not have independent existence or elusive existence. Ramanujacharya in one statement is trying to argue against Shankaracharya and Madhvacharya. Madhvacharya believes that Jiva Jagat is real and completely separate than Ishvara. There is no contact whatsoever. Jagat is always there in one corner, Jag is always in another corner, Ishvara is in the third corner. In Ramanujacharya's scheme of things, yes, they look separate, but they are one. They are part of the same thing. Madhvacharya, they are not at all parts, they are separate parts. Separation is the keynote of Dvaiti. While Shankaracharya, there is no Jeev, there is no Jagat, there is no corner, there is nothing, there is only one thing, that is Brahma. So Ramanujacharya says, diversity is there, but it is not independent existence for Jiva and Jagat. At the same time, it is not elusive existence, it is not Vivarta. It is one in identity and diverse in reality. That is why Ramanujacharya believes in three important aspects: Chit, that is soul or Jeev, Achit, that is matter, and Ishwar. There are three entities in this world. Chit and Achit, Jeev and Jagat are dependent on Ishwara, but Ishwara is not dependent on these two. Second, major difference with Shankaracharya is, Shankaracharya says, Brahma has no characters or attributes or guna of any type. It is Nishkalanka, Nishkriya, Ekameva Dvitiya. It is Satyam. It is Jnana, Satchit Ananda. Ramanujacharya catches on that point and says that yes, what you are saying is true. That is what I am saying. Satchit Ananda is nothing else but the attribute of God. Shankaracharya says attributeless Brahman. Ramanujacharya says no. Attribute inclusive Brahman. Then why are the Vedas saying neti? Neti because these attributes, these gunas of the Ishvara are difficult to fathom and describe by human mind. That is why it is called neti, not because he is attributeless. Ishvara has a Swarupa Gun and a Swabhava Gun. We will not get into the details of that. But the fact remains that Vishishtadvaita believes in Ishvara, or which is Brahman, with qualities. It's qualified Brahman. Shankaracharya has unqualified Brahma. And why not? All the auspicious qualities of Ishvara are the one which are missing in the Jiva and Jagat. When the qualities are developed by Jiva or Jagat during the course of their evolution of consciousness, they will also become similar to Ishvara. Vishishta antarbhava eva aikyam is the syncanon of Vishishtadvaita. And Jiva is not abhasa, as the Kevaladvaita says. According to Vishishtadvaita, Jiva is Jnana Sarupa Kartutva Bhoktrutva Yukta Jiva is called Chit. So the Kartrutva and the Bhoktrutva that we have is essentially an attribute of Ishvara because he is there inside me as Antaryami. Ramanujacharya believed that the Jivas that we have are of three types. One is called Nitya Jiva. Nitya Jiva means they are never in this samsara. They are always closer to Vishnu or Narayana. And those Jivas are like Garuda, Ananta. We need to understand Ramanujacharya. While understanding, we need to understand one important aspect of Ramanujacharya is the world that we see, which is full of miseries, pain, sorrow, etc., is of the Baddha Jivas, the bound Jivas, the Baddha Jivas. They are Baddha because of their karmas. But once they come out of this samsara, then they enter into higher realms, which is another completely different world, which is simultaneously existing, but we cannot fathom or perceive it right now. So a realized soul goes to Vaikuntha, and Vaikuntha for Ramanujacharya is not an imaginary world. It is a true world full of Shuddha Sattva, where all the Mukta Jiva are doing Sancharan in the utmost bliss. They are never subjected to any kind of miseries or birth or death or defect that you see in the normal world. So the Jiva tries to become Mukta. After becoming Mukta, he becomes a Sahachari, the one who is constantly in the presence of Ishvara, but he will not become Ishvara. Brahmavid Brahmeva Bhavati is the dictum or a fundamental principle of Kaivala Advaita. The one who knows Brahma becomes Brahma. However, in Ramanujacharya's Vishishtadvaita, Brahmavid Brahmeva na bhavati. Brahma prakaram bhavati. Prakaram and Brahmeva different. A realized soul is similar to Brahma or Ishvara. He is not identical in the sense that he cannot become Brahman. So, Ishvara Prapti or Vishnu Bhagavan's Prapti is to go close to Bhagavan Vishnu, but not becoming Bhagavan Vishnu, because the only difference between the realized soul according to Vishishtadvaita and Bhagavan Vishnu is Bhagavan Vishnu is capable of creating, maintaining, and destroying the creation. That is the only power, only thing deficient in the soul, which is mukta and gone close to Bhagavan Vishnu. All the schools other than Kevala Advaita schools, whether it is Shuddha Advaita, Vishishtadvaita, Dvaita or Bheda Abheda, in all these schools, the idea of a realized soul is to go close to the God. In pure Dvaita, Madhvacharya says, you may try whatever you do, you can become like a Krishna or Vishnu, but you will never become Vishnu or Krishna. All of them believe in this. That is why you can go in his kingdom, Salokata. You can go close to him, Samipata. You can assume almost identical nature with him, Sarupata. You can almost become indistinguishable from than with Ishvara, Sayujjata, but you will not be Vishnu or be Krishna or be Narayana. So according to Ramanujacharya, the Jiva is the controlled, Ishvara is the controller. Jiva is Niyamya, Ishvara is Niyanta. Jiva is the one who is supported, Dharya. Ishvara is Adhar. Jiva is Ansha. He is Anshi. Jiva is Shesha. Ishvara is Sheshi. And that is why my finger is the Jiva, my toe is the Jiva, my body cells are the Jiva, my body is Ishvara. What it means is God is free. According to Ramanujacharya, Ishvara is free from Swajatiya or Vijatiya Bheda. But he is not free from Swagata Bheda. Kevala Advaita, Shankaracharya believes that there is no Swagata Bheda also in Brahma. Because there is no Avayava, there is no Bheda. Ramanujacharya says, no, there is a Swagata Bheda in him. What is the Swagata Bheda? Ishvara, Jiva and Achit or Jagat. So this is Bhed in Ishvara himself. So Ramanujacharya or Vishishtadvaita believes in Swagata Bheda. Accordingly, Ramanujacharya exposes everything in Veda as Vishishtadvaita. The way Shankaracharya has taken recourse to Vedas to explain Tattvamasi, etc. In Kevala Advaita or Shankaracharya said Tat Tvam Asi. What is that Tat? Tat is not Ishvara, but by Lakshana you have to think of Brahma. What is Tvam? Tvam is not Jiva, but the Kutastha of the Jiva. This Lakshana is called Bhagat Tyaga Lakshana or Jahada Jahad Lakshana. Jahada Jahad Lakshana. What is this Lakshana? When two words are presented to us, then the meaning of those two words have to be derived by discarding some words and bringing in other words. So when you say Tat, Tat doesn't mean Ishvara, you discard the Ishvara, bring in Brahma there. Tvam means not the Jeev, you discard the Jeev, bring in Kutastha and then say Kutastha or Atma, Tat or Brahman are same, Tat Tvam Asi. This is Kevala Advaita style of thinking or explaining this Mahavakya. Ramanujacharya doesn't believe in it. He says, why do you want to take so much of exercise of Tattvamasi and Bhagat Tyaga Lakshana? Go for Vachyartha. Tat means Ishvara. Tvam means Jiva. You are the one. Tat Tvam Asi. And when Tat and Tvam is so directly pointing to Ishvara and Jiva, why do the exercise of Jahad Ajahad Lakshana or the Bhagat Tyaga Lakshana? It is wrong. So that is why Tattvamasi is interpreted by Vishishtadvaita in this particular manner. Vishishtadvaita believes that the Brahma or the Ishvara is transcendental. But for the sake of Kalyana, again, Brahma or the Ishvara or the Narayana or the Vishnu or the Bhagavan Sri Krishna has a compassion for the Kalyana of the Jivas. So Kalyana or Karuna is one of the attributes of Brahma, that is Vishnu. For that sake, he takes birth into this immanent world. So from transcendency, he becomes immanent. And that is why when he comes down, he takes 5 different forms. His 5 different forms are, one is the transcendental form, that after reaching the stage we come to know. It is called Narayana form or Paravasudev form. Narayana form is the transcendental or Para form. The second is he himself becomes the Jiva. But the Jiva is suffering. How Ishvara can suffer? No, in the Jiva, the Antaryami, the inner controller, is the second stage where God descends. So all the Jivas, they have Antaryami as a controller or a Niyamak Tattva inside, which is nothing else but Ishvara himself, the Narayana himself. Then to create the world, he takes what is called as a Chaturvyuha, 4 forms. Vasudeva, Sankarshana, Pradyumna, Aniruddha. These are the 4 forms called Chaturvyuha. Each of them are given specific task of creation, Utpatti, Dharana, Poshan, and Vinash. So to do all these 4 also, he takes 3rd form. The fourth form is Ishvara or Brahma or Narayana also descends as human avatar, which is called Vibhava. Bhagwanta's or Bhagwan's avatar in this, for the sake of welfare of the jivas, is called Vibhava. This Vibhava can be Mukhya Vibhava, which is Krishna, and Gauna Vibhava is Shiva and Buddha. Shankara has been given as a Gauna avatar. Mukhya avatar is Krishna, because we are in the Vishnu Sampradaya. And the last form that the God takes is called Vigraha. It is called Archavatar. Archavatar means in order that the normal jivas can worship the deity, the Brahma or the Narayana takes the form of a Vigraha or the Murti. That is why in Vaishnava Sampradaya, the Murti of Narayana or Vishnu or Vithala or Krishna is considered and given enormous importance, because it is not something made up of wood or stone or metal, but it is Sakshat Narayana which has taken that shape so the jivas can have ease of offering their prayers. The very concept of jiva can offer prayers for its own salvation is a thought which was inculcated in the minds of the jiva by Bhagwan Vishnu or Narayana himself for the sake of welfare of his own jivas, because Narayana considers jiva and jagat to be his part. And that is why Ramanujacharya or Vishishtadvaita believes that the world is real. Jagan mithya na jagat satyam. So how is then relation between Jiva, Jagat and Ishvara? Is it Ishvara's parinam that the Jiva is formed? Or is it because of the Vivarta as explained by Shankaracharya? Ramanujacharya says, there is no parinama, there is no Vivarta. The relationship between Ishvara, Jiva and Jagat is called a Pruthak Sambandha. What is a Pruthak Sambandha? The milk becomes the curd or the yogurt. It is called parinam. The mirage appears or the snake appears on the rope is called vivarta. So one is illusory appearance, one is actual transformation. Ramanujacharya says either of this doesn't happen. Because the three are nothing else but one Advaita, there is no harm for that which is one to manifest in diversity. Diversity need not mean independent existence. Under one existence, you can have diversity. There is a tree that is planted and now it gave a flower. A tree giving flower doesn't mean that the tree is different than the flower. The flower may have characteristics. The tree may have characteristics, but the characteristics are nothing else but the gunas. There must be the guna pre-existing in the tree, which has manifested as flower or the fruit. So why have independent existence for flower and fruit? It is dependent existence. And the dependency is because of the unity. So it is separate, yet not independent. That is Vishishtadvaita. When we say Neela Kamala, blue lotus, Neela, blue color has independent existence. Kamala, lotus has independent existence. But Neela Kamal, when we say, they lose their independent existence because Neel alone has no significance because it is Neela Kamala. So only when Kamal exists, Neel has some significance. And only when Neel exists, Kamal has a significance. So there is an interdependence between the two. The Visheshan and Vishesha are interdependent. And their interdependence itself proves that they are one, yet they are separate. Neela is separate, Kamal is separate, yet Neela Kamal is one. Similarly, Jiva Jagat is separate and Ishvara is separate, yet they are one. This is called Vishishta Advaita. Question here comes that once this relationship established, it has its impact on the ways of attaining the mukti or the moksha. According to Shankaracharya, since everything is illusory, to transcend from Vyavaharik Satta, Pratibhasik Satta, and all the three avasthas to the Turiya Avastha or the fourth state where one can only see Brahma and everything appears illusory is the method to go upwards. So for Shankaracharya, propitiation of God or archana, bhakti of God is only an intermediary step to go upwards. In a very crude analogy, we can say that in Shankaracharya's philosophy, God is required simply to keep the foot on the shoulder of God and then jump beyond. The beyond is truth, not the one on whose shoulder you have kept the foot. Ramanujacharya completely disagrees, says, no, Ishvara itself is the destination. There is nothing beyond it. So the whole purpose is to reach Ishvara, and the only way to reach Ishvara is to know his attributes, know this relationship that I am nothing but part and parcel of his own creation. That awareness itself is mukti. And right now, because of my karma, I am into baddhata, I am bound by the karma phala, and that is why I should always do Veda Vihita Nishkama Karma so that I can start appreciating the virtues or the qualities or the gunas of the Ishvara. I shall start appreciating it in the form of eulogizing the Ishvara, surrendering myself to his mighty power, realize that I am Alpadnya and he is Sarvadnya, and all this will make you feel smaller and smaller, because more smaller you feel yourself, you will come to know the largerness of the Ishvara. This process of considering or making oneself smaller is called Sharanagati. The Sharanagati is to completely surrender the feeling of my mightiness, then to come to a stage to realize how alpadnya, how small, how weak, how small I am, and then to surrender completely by flinging yourself at the feet of Narayana is called Sharanagati. In order to decrease the ego or the ahankara in the samsara, you start developing vairagya and start slowly reducing your ego. That process of reducing ego is called prapatti. And once prapatti reaches the maturity, then you realize the greatness of the Lord. Realizing smallness of the soul is prapatti. Realizing greatness of the God is Sharanagati, because only when you see mighty Himalayas, you feel small. So that is a Sharanagati, which is again described in his book called Sharanagati Gadyam. It is the Grantha written by Ramanujacharya, where his metaphysical exposition even defeats in its argumentative style even Shankaracharya, a Rishi of enormous brilliance. And he gave his Sharanagati as the ultimate solution for the bhakti. Anukulasya sankalpaha pratikulasya varjanam rakshishyati iti vishvaso goptrutve varnam tatha atma nikshepa karpanye shadvidha sharanagati. Always what Lord would want, I shall do. I shall completely abstain from what Lord won't want. I shall completely believe that he will protect me. Rakshishyati iti vishvaso yogakshemam vahamyaham. Goptrutve varnam tata. He shall take care of me, my maintenance. Atma Nikshepa, even my own existence, life also is consecrated, thrown at his feet. And Karpanya, I am the smallest of the small, poorest of the poor, are the 6 ways of Sharanagati to reach that. That is how the Vishishtadvaita was established by Ramanuja Acharya. It is next in importance to Kevaladvaita. Amongst the schools of philosophies followed by majority of sadhakas, the Bhakti Sampradaya, which is extremely popular in India, the Bhakti Marga, which was considered to be simpler and commoner to the common people, has been expounded in detail by these acharyas. So this is in gist what the Vishishtadvaita is. We shall have a glimpse of other 4 schools in short, and then we shall be prepared to start the journey of Brahma Sutra. Hari Om. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Mudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.
Hari Om, Sanjay ji. We'll just see if any questions or clarification.
Hari Om, Sanjay ji. This mukti or salvation is not figuring in the Ramanujacharya's Vishishtadvaita, is it not? There is no concept of
salvation is not figuring, because the concept of mukti, you are becoming mukta from where? You
from
are
the loka.
in Lord's presence. You reach Lord's presence. So you do not become mukta, you become a sahachari of the Lord himself. He is, you go away from what is appearing illusory world, etc. According to Kevaladvaita, you go out of this world, Jagat, and then reach Brahman. Ramanujacharya says, Jagat also is his, Jiva also is his. From where you will become mukta? All that can happen is, you realize that you are the part of this view rachana. You are also the part of this whole kaleidoscope. That itself is mukti. So it is that escape from one state of mind to another state of mind. What is going to happen is, you will realize, like in Sankhya, you realize that Prakriti is separate and Purusha is separate. That is Kaivalya. Similarly, in Vishishtadvaita, the day you come to know how Lord has created this, Lord, the Jagat and the Jeev are nothing else but one and the same. None of that is untrue. All of that is true, and part of it, that itself is called mukti.
The problem is, that is good concept, but the dukkha, the sorrow never ends in that way. That is the point where
Dukkham has to end, because dukkham is an affliction of the jiva by not understanding that he is part of this trinity. Ishvara jiva forming one homogeneous thing is, when not understood, you are subjected to dukkha. The moment you understand it, you are completely. That is why Ramanujacharya's description of Vaikuntha is where all nitya mukta jiva are doing free sancharana without any sorrow. It is a state of continuous Vaikuntha Dham Ananda Swarupa. Everybody is in bliss there. It is completely devoid of all the sorrows and all pains and pangs that one gets into this particular or prapancha. Realm of the Vishnu. Another important concept is for Kevala Dvaita or Shankaracharya, salvation, moksha is the last step. The Bhakti believes that moksha is a station that comes on the way to Narayana. If you read the Vaishnava Sampradaya books or the scriptures like Ujjwala Neelamani or Bhakti Rahasya, even of Madhusudan Saraswati, and even Jnaneshwar Maharaj, he says that Sahu Purusharthanche Shri Bhakti Ase, at the head of all the Purushartha, and the fourth Purushartha is Moksha. On the head of Moksha lies the Bhakti, that is called Jnanottara Bhakti. In fact, Kevaladvaita later on even brought this concept in Kevaladvaita itself under the garb of Jnanottara Bhakti. So Bhakti considers Gaudiya Vishnu Sampradaya and even other Vaishnava Sampradayas say that, oh God, please don't give me mukti. That is a useless thing that might come on my way, but just take it away. Tukaram Maharaj tells Vithala that, hey Vithala, if you try to give me mukti, I will fight with you, because who wants to become free? I want to be forever your servant, because in that what I get, I will not get it in mukti. So that is why the concept of mukti is completely different in bhakti. Hariyo.
So it is not totally one is not totally contradictory to another. Actually, some complementary parts are also there.
Absolutely. And Aurobindo Maharaj has synthesized this much better. Reaching Mount Everest is important, or after reaching Mount Everest, coming down and then helping others to reach Mount Everest is important. In case of Kevaladvaita, you become no, tyagam of false impression of this world, then reach the Brahman. So what happens is you become Brahmi Bhuta, all right. But after becoming Brahmi Bhuta, when you realize that this creation of the world, which is nothing else but Lord's creation, you re-enter into Lord's creation, but not as a Jiva, but as a Parameshwar himself in the form of Bhakta. That is, says, I am in the heart of Bhakta, because Bhakta is nothing else but Krishna himself that has emanated in the human form, just because he wants to be away from the Brahman and do the bhakti of Brahman. Unitary consciousness and having dichotomy and enjoying the unitary consciousness, these are two different concepts. That is why Tukaram says that you are a poor person, Vithala. You are such a poor person that you don't know what a bhakta gets. I, being your bhakta, I enjoy enormous wealth of happiness or enormous wealth of bliss. Unfortunately, you cannot do it because you are Bhagavan. Imagine the derogatory statement made by Tukaram Maharaj in an appreciative sense of Vithala, because he considers bhakta to be superior to Bhagavan. That is the importance of bhakti. So, these are all complementary to each other, but it is like this. Eating the mango by cutting is more tasty, or squeezing the juice and drinking it more tasty. At the end, taste both had. That is why it is complementary, not at all contradictory to each other. Hariyo.